let's see how do you define the similarity between the vectors. So far, in the previous slide we have computed given a single vector. So how do I identify the norm or the magnitude of that vector? So we are using p-norms for that. So now the same can be extended to identify similarity between two vectors. So given two different vectors, so x is a vector and y is another vector, and both are of size n dimensional, both are in the same space. So in that case, so the similarity between the vectors can be defined as, so whether they are similar or not. Basically you can use inner product, right. So the similarity between these vectors can be defined as the distance between the two vectors. So let us see what are the different types of distances we can define. Of course there are few choices. So this is a supremum distance. So we will see in detail what these types of distances are and how to compute these distances. So supremum distance we have, then we have Manhattan distance, then we have Euclidean distance, and we also have Minkowski's distance. So these are the four possible ways to compute the similarity or even the distance between the two vectors. So if they are far, that means the distance between the vectors is more, then you can say that they are less similar. And if the distance between the vectors is less, then you can say that they are more similar, right. So once you define the distance between the vectors, you can say that whether they are similar or not. So that's how the similarity between the vectors can be identified. So in machine learning tasks, so any of the data is represented as vectors. Say for example, I am representing some text as a feature vector. So for the first object O1. So then I have another object, say for example it is a document classification task. I want to identify how similar these two documents are. So how do you represent the documents as a feature vectors, right. So this is one vector and this is the other vector. So now I should say that whether they are similar or not. So how do I say that? So now they are after all vectors, and then so you can apply any of these distance measures, and depending on the distance measure you can say whether they are similar or not. So if the distance between these two documents is high, then you can say that they are less similar, otherwise they are more similar. So that is how the distance measures are very useful in case of the pattern recognition systems. Now let us consider this Euclidean distance. So you can see, now consider this is the vector x1 y1 and this is the vector x2 y2. So it is nothing but the Pythagorean distance. Euclidean distance actually gives the Pythagorean distance between these two vectors. If it is in the two dimensional, we know that. So you can even extend that to higher dimensions also. So that is how any of these distance measures, they give the distance between two vectors, and depending on the distance measure you can say whether the vectors are similar or not. Now let us see how do we define these distance measures. So the Manhattan, Minkowski's, Euclidean distance and the supremum distance. So this is how they are defined. So given any two vectors, so let us consider x is the n-dimensional vector and y is n-dimensional vector, then define the distance measures. So in case of the Manhattan distance, so it's kind of, you can consider this as an extension to the L1 norm. So when we computed the L1 norm, so you can have the similarity between the Manhattan distance and the L1 norm. So however we defined the L1 norm, so we are defining the similar way the Manhattan distance. But here in this case, so we are considering two vectors. In case of the L1 norm, because it's a norm, only one vector is involved there. Okay, that's how you can associate that. So here you just take the difference between the corresponding elements of the two vectors and then take their absolute values and then just sum up them. So that gives me the Manhattan distance. So what you need to do is you just take the corresponding elements x1 and y1. So just compute their differences x1 y1, x2 y2, x3 y3 and take the absolute value. So you need not to consider the sign. So you just take the absolute value and then you just sum them up all the values. So x1 y1 plus x1 minus y1 plus x2 minus y2 plus x3 minus y3, so on and so forth for the last element. Till the last element you do the same, and then finally you just apply the addition. So that gives me the Manhattan distance. And now let us see what the Euclidean distance is. So it is similar to the Euclidean norm except that you are extending to two different vectors because there are two vectors involved. So, you need to take the difference between the two vectors. So, it's kind of you are representing the difference between these two vectors. The individual elements are difference is taken and you take the square of that and then sum the result and then take the square root of that. So, that gives the Euclidean distance of the vectors x and y. So, now let us see what the Minkowski's distance is. So, in case of the Minkowski's distance, so here in this case your R value, actually it is a general form for your norm representation, right. So, here this is the general form for your distance relationship. So, you are raising to the power of, so in the case of the Manhattan distance, so if you observe the equations are all the same except that, so here the power is raised to 1 and there is a square root, but because the square root of 1 we ignore that, and here in this case the square root is 2 and the power is raised to 2, and if you extend that to R, then that is called as Minkowski's distance. And now let us see what is supremum distance. In case of the supremum distance, so you just take the difference between all the individual elements of the vectors and take their absolute differences, then consider the maximum value among them. So, that gives me the supremum distance of the vectors x and y. Now, let us have an example for the Manhattan distance. So, Manhattan distance is basically called as L1 norm also, and this is the formula for the Manhattan distance between the two vectors x and y. Now, consider this example, x and y are the given two vectors. So, 0, 3, 4, 5 and 7, 6, 3, minus 1. In that case, how do we compute the Manhattan distance? So, you just need to take the difference between these two corresponding values and their absolute values you need to consider. So, 0 minus 7, the absolute value is 7, and then, so for the individual elements you just sum them up. So, 3 minus 6, the absolute value is 3. Similarly, 4 minus 3, it is 1, the absolute value is 1, and 5 minus of minus 1, it is plus 6 and the absolute value is 6. So, you just sum them up and that gives me 17. So, the Manhattan distance between these two vectors is 17. That is how we can compute. Now, let us see how do you compute the Euclidean distance between the given two vectors. So, this Euclidean distance is also called as L2 norm, and how do we compute is, so using this formula you can compute. Now, let us consider these are the given vectors, and how do we compute the Euclidean distance is, so you just take the difference between the corresponding elements and their absolute values raised to the power of 2. So, now 0 minus 7 whole square plus 3 minus 6 whole square, 4 minus 3 whole square, then 5 minus of minus 1 whole square, and then just sum them up and then take the square root of that result. So, that gives me the Euclidean distance between the two vectors x and y. Let us see how do we compute the supremum distance with an example. So, this is also called as L1 max norm because similar to the L1 norm we are identifying, but the maximum value you are taking, that is why it is called as L1 max distance or the L1 max norm also. So, this is the formula, we have seen that this is the formula that can be used, and now given this vector x and y, so how do we compute the supremum distance? So, you just take the absolute difference between the corresponding elements and take the maximum value. So, 0 minus 7 absolute value is 7, 3 minus 6 the absolute value is 3. So, 4 minus 3 absolute value is 1. So, 5 minus 1 the absolute value is 6, and so among these elements the maximum element is 7. So, 7 is the supremum distance between these two vectors x and y. So, that is how we can compute the similarity between given vectors. So, for any two given vectors you can identify the similarity between these two vectors. So, instead of finding directly the similarity, we have discussed various distance measures like supremum distance, Euclidean distance or the L1 distance. So, you can even call it as Manhattan or the Minkowski's distance. So, that is how you can compute the distance. So, when the distance between the vectors is high, you can say that they are less similar, right? And when the distance between the vectors is very small, then you can say that they are highly similar. So, that is how you can compute the similarity between the vectors with the help of the distance measures. So depending on the application or depending on the type of data you have with you, you can choose any of these distance measures. And now let us see how do we compute orthogonal and orthonormal vectors. We have some special types of vectors. So given any two vectors, so how to identify whether they are the orthogonal vectors or the orthonormal vectors. So we have already seen if the angle between the two vectors is 90 degrees, that is cos theta is 0, in that case we can say that the vectors are orthogonal. So we will be defining it in a different way. So now let us see when you can call the given vectors as orthogonal vectors is, so the vectors x and y, they can be called as orthogonal vectors. So if the inner product between the two vectors is 0, right. So in that case you can call the vectors x and y as orthogonal vectors. And now let us see when you can call the vectors x and y as orthonormal vectors. So they are orthonormal, they can be called as orthonormal vectors. So if the inner product between these two vectors is 0 and also the individual norm of the vectors must be equal to 1. So if all the three constraints are satisfied, so then only I can call that as orthonormal vectors. So the vectors x and y are orthonormal. So if the inner product between the two vectors are 0, or simply you can say that, so the vectors are orthogonal to each other, that is the angle between these two vectors. If you apply cos theta and identify the angle between these two vectors, then it is 90 degrees. So then you can call that as orthogonal vectors. And the further vectors to become the orthonormal vectors, so in addition to this property, that is x transpose y equal to 0, the inner product should be 0 and also the individual norm of the vectors must be equal to 1. So in that case only you can call them as orthonormal vectors. So for the vectors to become orthonormal vectors, first they should be orthogonal, and in addition to that they should satisfy the constraint their individual norms of the vectors as unit. So in that case you can call them as orthonormal vectors. So these two vectors, when the set of given vectors are orthonormal and orthogonal vectors, so they have some special properties and which makes our life easier for computations. So that's why we are very much interested in these types of special vectors. So in the previous slide we have seen so how to identify given two vectors are orthogonal or not and two vectors are orthonormal or not. So but now so we will see how to identify the given set of vectors. So x1 to xn are the given set of vectors. So now we will see how to identify whether these set of vectors are orthogonal or not and whether these set of vectors are orthonormal or not. How do we identify that? So we can identify that. So given these set of n vectors. So remember these are the vectors. So these are not the elements. So x1 is a vector, x2 is a vector, x3 is a vector, xn is a vector. So these are the set of vectors. So these set of vectors you can call them as orthogonal if they satisfy this condition. So the condition here is, so when you multiply any two vectors from this set, that is the inner product of these two vectors, any two different vectors, so it should be of 0. Right, that means, so if you consider any pair of vectors, two different vectors from this set, they should be orthogonal to each other. And if you consider the same vectors inner product, that is x1 transpose x1, x2 transpose x1, so it can be of any real value. So in that case I can call these set of vectors as orthogonal vectors. Now let us see. When can I call these set of vectors as orthonormal vectors? So I can call these set of vectors as orthonormal vectors. So when if I multiply any two different vectors from the given set, then so the resultant, the inner product between the two different vectors must result in a 0 value. So the same condition should be satisfied here also, right? So but when you apply the inner product on the same vector, that is x1 transpose x1, x2 transpose x2, in that case it should result in a 1. So observe the difference, here it can be a k, it can be 1. So here it can be any real value. The inner product on the same vectors can be any real value in case of orthogonal, but in case of the orthonormal, so x1 transpose x1, x2 transpose x2 and so on. That means the norm of the vectors should be unit. That is, all the pair of vectors must be orthogonal to each other, and every vector in this set must be of unit vectors. So, if these two conditions are satisfied, then only I can call the set of vectors as orthonormal vectors. Now, let us have some examples. So, given two vectors, so how do we identify whether they are orthogonal or not, or orthonormal or not? So, how do I identify whether the given vectors are orthogonal or not? So, you need to identify the inner product between these two vectors. So, x and y, the inner product, how do we compute? X transpose y. So, just compute the inner product. So, if this inner product is 0, then that implies that the two vectors are orthogonal, otherwise they are not orthogonal. Let us see how do we identify the inner product of these two vectors. So, 1 into 2 plus 3 into 2 plus 2 into minus 4. So, that value if you compute, it is equal to 0. So, that means that implies that these two vectors are orthogonal to each other, but they are not orthonormal. The reason is simple. So, the norm of this vector x is 9 and the norm of the vector y is 29. So, these two vectors are not unit vectors. So, they are not orthonormal, but they are orthogonal. So, that is how we can compute. Now, let us have another example. Now, consider 4, 2, 3 is the vector and 7, 3 and minus 4 is the other vector. Now, if you identify the x transpose y, then it is 22. It is 22. So, then the norm of these two vectors, the inner product of these two vectors is not 0, right. So, in that case I can say that they are not orthogonal. They are not orthogonal. So, if they are not orthogonal, anyhow they cannot be orthonormal also, right. So, they are not orthogonal, they are not orthonormal also. Now, let us see what the linear combination of the vectors is. So, a vector v can be written as a linear combination of a set of vectors, k vectors v1 to vk. So, when you can represent it this way. So, that is the given vector v can be represented as a linear combination of k vectors when you can write the vector v using this formula, in this form. So, that is alpha 1 v1 plus alpha 2 v2 plus alpha 3 v3 and so on plus alpha k vk. So, if you can write your vector v as a linear combination of the other set of vectors, other set of k vectors, then you can say that, so it is a linear combination of the, your vector as a linear combination of the other vectors. That is how you can define linear combination. So, now here you should note that alpha 1 to alpha k, these are all the constants. So, the real values, they can be any real constant values, they are the scalar values, not the vector values. And now, if you observe any vector in the 3-dimensional space, so any vector v in 3-dimensional space, they can be represented as a linear combination of these 3 unit vectors. Basically, these are called as the unit vectors in the 3-dimensional space. So, why we are calling it as unit vectors here is, so here it is 1 in this case and these are zeros in the other places. And similarly, if you observe j, here it is the second position is 1 and remaining values are 1s. Similarly, the same is applicable to k also. So, because it is a 3-dimensional, we have 3 unit vectors. If it is a 2-dimensional, we have 2 unit vectors. So, in the case of 2-dimensional, the unit vectors are I and j, and I can write it as 1 and j, and j can be written as 0 and 1. So, these are the unit vectors for the 2-dimensional case. So, the same can be extended to any dimensions also. So, what is the advantage of this unit vectors is, any vector in the n-dimensional, here in this case 3-dimensional space, can be represented as a linear combination of these 3 unit vectors. So, consider this vector v, I am taking as a general form, right, a, b, c. So, a can be anything, b can be any value, c can be any value. So, if I can write that as a linear combination of these 2 vectors, these 3 vectors, so any vector in the 3-dimensional space can be written as a linear combination of these 3 vectors. Now, let us see how v can be written. So, v can be written as a into I plus b into j plus c into k, right. So, that is how you can get, so the original vector v itself. So, here a can be, a is, so here I, j and k are these unit vectors. right? So here V can be written as represented as a linear combination of the unit vectors I, j and k. So now let's see what is linear dependent vectors. So when I can say that the vectors are linearly dependent. So if you consider any set of vectors, k vectors v1 to vk, and they are called as linearly dependent vectors. So when you can write at least one of these vectors as a linear combination of the other vectors. So we already understand what the linear combination is, and if any one of these vectors can be written as a linear combination of these vectors, then you can call such set of vectors as linearly dependent vectors, or I can say that, so these are not independent vectors, they are dependent vectors, right? Or otherwise, in other words, you can say that, so there exists constants alpha 1 to alpha k, and you can write all these k vectors in this representation. So where alpha 1 v1 plus alpha 2 v2 plus and so on, alpha k vk is 0. So the linear there exists some representation, this is equal to 0, where at least one of this alpha 1 to alpha k is non-zero. So in that case, I can say that the set of vectors v1 to vk as linearly dependent vectors. Now consider this example v1, v2 and v3. So now, so let's see whether they are linearly dependent vectors or not. So now if you consider, so v1, v2, v3, v3 can be written as a linear combination of v1 and v2. So that's how I can say that they are linearly dependent vectors. So if you observe how you can write that is v3 equal to minus 2 into v1 plus 1 into v2. So that is, if you have these two vectors, so you can derive v3 from these two vectors. So this concept is very, very important in the pattern recognition or the machine learning algorithms, because in case of the feature reduction techniques, if you assume that this is a feature, this is another feature and this is another feature for the data, then if I have these two features alone, so I can extract the third feature from these two features itself, right? So I can save the space without storing this feature itself. I can extract that feature from these two features, right? So that's the advantage of having the linearly dependent vectors. So that means you need not to actually have the dependent features. So that's how here I can say that V3 is a linear combination of the vectors V1 and V2. Now let's see linear independent. So when you don't want the linearly dependent vectors, means you should have the linearly independent vectors, right? So now let's define what are the linearly independent vectors are. So if you have the set of vectors v1 to vk, then you can say that they are linearly independent when none of the vectors, so given these set of vectors, so none of them can be written as a linear combination of the other set of vectors. Say for example, if I have any vector p vector vp, so none of these vectors can be written as a linear combination of the other vectors. So if that is satisfied, I can say that they are linearly independent. Or in other ways you can say that, so alpha 1 v1, alpha 2 v2 and so on, alpha k vk, it is 0 when and only if alpha 1, alpha k, alpha all the alphas are zeros. That is, all the constants must be 0 values. In that case only this should be 0. So in that case you can say that all these set of vectors are linearly independent. So now let's have an example. So this v1, v2 and v3. So now let's see whether they are linearly independent or not. So now none of these vectors can be written as a linear, you can check that if you want. So none of these vectors v1 and v2, v3 can be written as a linear combination of the other two vectors. So you can check. So with v2 I cannot extract with the help of v1 and v3, and v3 I cannot write using the vectors v1 and v2. So that's how none of these vectors are dependent on the other vectors. So they are the set of linearly independent vectors. Let's see what the span of the vectors is. So span of the vectors can be defined like this. So let V be the vector space and S is a set of vectors of n vectors. So that is V1 to Vn are the vectors. so which is actually a subset of the vector space V. Okay, so V is a given vector space and S is a subset of this vector space. Then in that case you can define span of the vector as the linear combination of all these vectors V1 to Vn. So all the linear combination of the vectors, the set of vectors V1 to Vn, that forms the span of the vectors. So that's how you can define, and it is always denoted as the span. So using the word span of this set of vectors. So that's how you can define that. And you can say that, so if V1, V2, V3, so here V2 is present. So V2, V3 and so on Vk are the vectors, then in that case you take any linear combination of these vectors that is belonging to the span of vectors. Right, that's how we can define the span of the vectors. Now let's see, so given this vector V, we are going to check whether it is in the span of this set of vectors or not. That means, so can we get this vector as a linear combination of this set of vectors? So if you can say that, you can say that this vector is a span of this vector space. Vector can be written as, so that is V equal to, so already we have written here, right. So this V can be written as C1 into 3 minus 1 2, that is the first vector, and C2 into the second vector. So this vector V can be written as C1 into the first vector, right, and C2 into the second vector and C3 into the third vector, where C1 and C2, C3 are these values. So C1 is 4 and C2 is minus 1 and C3 is 2. So in that case you can say that, so the vector V is in the span of this set of vectors. So how can I say that? So you are writing this new vector as the linear combination of the given 3 set of vectors. So it need not to be 3, even if you can write it with the subset of the vectors also, that is fine. So but you must be able to get the linear this vector as a linear combination of the sum of these vectors, right. So here we are able to do that. That's how I can say that V is a linear combination of, or V is in the span of these set of vectors, right. Now let's see what the basis of the vectors is. So in this case the basis of the vector space can be defined as, so the vector space is V, the vector space is V, and the set of vectors, given vectors are V1 to Vk, then you can define the basis of the vector space as, so V should be the span of the subset of vectors V1 to Vk, that condition has to be satisfied, and also all these vectors, the subset of vectors must be linearly independent. So if these two conditions are satisfied, then only I can say that, so these set of vectors form the basis for the vector space V. Now let's consider the example. Of course we have already discussed this concept. So let I, j and k are the unit vectors for the 3-dimensional case. So in that case any vector can be represented as a linear combination of these 3 vectors. So now let's see an example. So 2, 2, 2. Can I represent this vector as the linear combination of these vectors? Yes, of course I can. So if I have this vector and using these vectors as a linear combination of these 3 vectors, I can extract the given vector, right. So like that any vector in the 3-dimensional space can be written as a linear combination of these unit vectors. So you can consider these questions. So given this vector, try to apply the norms using different forms, you try to identify the norms. So then given these 2 vectors V1 and V2, so try to identify the inner product and the outer product of the 2 given vectors. So now you can even find the given, for the given 2 vectors, you just try to identify the cosine similarity between the vectors and try to derive the angle depending on the angle between these 2 vectors. So try to explain whether what is the direction of these 2 vectors, or what is the direction relationship between these 2 vectors. So then given these 2 vectors, so try to compute the distance using different measures. So you need to apply Euclidean norm, so then you need to apply L1 norm, L max norm, so all those kinds of distance measures you need to apply. So now given these 3 vectors, so you need to check whether they are orthogonal, they are forming the orthogonal set or not. And similarly given this same set of vectors, so try to identify whether they are orthonormal or not. Okay, so you take these problems as an exercise and you can solve it. So now, so far in this class, we have discussed why linear algebra is required. So in the context of pattern recognition, is it required to understand the mathematical concepts like linear algebra? So I have given enough justification and enough intuition for that with the help of multiple examples. Then we have discussed what are various mathematical objects, like what scalars are, what vectors are, what matrices are, and what tensors are. Then what is the how to identify magnitude of the vectors, and what are the various operations that can be applied on vectors. Then what are the independent and dependent vectors. So when the given set of vectors, so then can we identify whether they are linearly independent or not, so, or whether they are orthogonal to each other or not, whether they are orthonormal or not. So how to identify all these things we have discussed in this lecture. So thank you for watching this lecture.